And so if we're doing verse by verse and we're deconstructing everything, we're getting a ton of information out of every single verse. 48 chapters, this is the amount of information you get. I've got to get that down into, 20, 25 minutes here. So I'm just telling you, God's word is just full of so much that is there for us to, to pull into. All right, Ezekiel. Ezekiel, strengthened by God is what it means. 48 chapters long, another lengthy book. The author is Ezekiel the prophet. It's the section of prophets. He is, of course, one of the 4 major prophets. Next week, we will discuss the last major prophet, who is Daniel. It was written approximately 593 to 571 BC, and the ministry was about 22 years. Who was Ezekiel? Well, Ezekiel comes from the priestly line of Buzi, his father. Just like Jeremiah, Ezekiel was both a priest and a prophet. Ezekiel and his wife lived in Jerusalem. Notice the reason I put that in there is to show you he had a wife. Okay, lived in Jerusalem. In 597, the second wave of deportation of Jewish captives to Babylon began. We've mentioned this one other time, but just to remind you, there are 3 waves that happen. One in, I think it's 602. I could be off on that last one, 604 maybe. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 597 and then 586. So the Babylonians come and begin to take captives in Jerusalem. Before they destroy the temple and before they destroy the city, they begin to do that. The destruction occurs here in 586. That's when the temple falls. That's when Jerusalem is completely destroyed. That's when the last of the captives are taken in 586. It begins in 602. Now Daniel and his little friends, they're in the 602 section. What we know from history, what we've learned is that it was kind of the cream of the crop taken there. They took the best of the best in the first wave of deportation. Then in 597, Ezekiel and his group of people are going to be taken into Babylon. And then in 586, that's the last remaining ones who are taken when Jerusalem is destroyed. So Ezekiel is during this time. Daniel and his friends are already in Babylon at that time, and we'll learn more about that next week. So 25-year-old Ezekiel would have been among them. That's how old he would have been when he was taken. And it was during this time, after the long trip to Babylon and after 5 years of captivity by the river Hibar in Babylon, that Ezekiel was commissioned by God. Ezekiel was now 30 years old. So he had been in Babylon how many years? 5 years before he was commissioned. So all of the captives are going down by the river. There's a I want to say refugee camp, but that's not the right thing because it was better than that. But it was like a little community of captives that were held in that particular place. Ezekiel was 30 years old, the same age that a Jewish man would begin his ministry as a priest in the temple. Just an interesting note, because in Numbers 4, we read that at 30 years old, that's when they become priests, and that's when Ezekiel is to be called, although, remember, he is of a priestly line and would have been a priest at that time. Now, Ezekiel chapters 1 through 3. We're not going to have time to read the whole thing today, but I am going to ask you to just quickly follow through with me a little bit. What time is it? I don't think... Oh, whatever. We're going to go ahead because I want you to see this. It's too amazing and you need to see this. So can you start?
In the year that King Uzziah died...
No. You're in the 30th year in the 4th month. Chapters 1 through 3, the call of a prophet.
Okay, where can we?
You guys don't have that one?
It's in the back.
It's in the very back.
Okay, I got it.
Got it? Good. Okay.
Okay. In my 30th year,
In the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kabar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kabar River in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him.
Kathy or me?
Go ahead.
Okay. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved.
Their faces looked like this. Each of the 4 had the face of a human being. On the right side, each had a face of a lion. On the left, the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. They each had 2 wings spreading out upward, each wing touching that of the creature on either side, and each had 2 other wings covering its body. Each one went straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, without turning as they went. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire and like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and the lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning.
And I looked at the living creatures. I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. It was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change directions as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around.
When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved, and when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because of the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, they also moved. When the creatures stood still, they also stood still, and then the creatures rose from the ground. The wheels rose along with them, because the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels.
Spread out above the heads of the living creatures was that what looked something like a vault, sparkling like crystal and awesome. Under the vault, the wings were stretched out, one toward the other, and each had 2 wings covering its body. When the creatures moved, I heard the sound of their wings like the roar of rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of an army. When they stood still, they lowered their wings.
Then there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the vault, over their heads, was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. Like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him.
This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down, and I heard the voice of one speaking. He said to me, "Son of man, stand up on your feet, and I will speak to you." As he spoke, the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet, and I heard him speaking to me.
He said, "Son of man, I am sending you, the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. The people to whom I am sending you are obstinate and stubborn. They say to them, "This is what the sovereign Lord says," and whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them, and you, son of man, do not be afraid of them or their words. Do not be afraid. Through briars or thorns are all around you, and you live among scorpions. Do not be afraid of what they say or be terrified by them. Though they are rebellious people, you must speak by words to them, whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious. But you, son of man, listen to what I say to you. Do not rebel like that rebellious people. Open your mouth and eat what I give you.
Then I looked, and I saw a hand stretched out to me. In it was a scroll which he unrolled before me. On both sides of it were written words of lament and mourning and woe. And he said to me, "Son of man, eat what is before you, eat this scroll, then go and speak to the people of Israel." So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. Then he said to me, "Son of man, eat the scroll I am giving you, and fill your stomach with it." So I ate it. It tasted sweet as honey in my mouth.
He then said to me, "Son of man, go now to the people of Israel and speak my words to them. You are not being sent to a people of obscure speech and strange language, but to the people of Israel, not to many peoples of obscure speech and strange language. Those words you cannot understand. Surely if I had sent you to them, they would have listened to you. But the people of Israel are not willing to listen to you because they are not willing to listen to me. For all the Israelites are hardened and obstinate. But I will make you as unyielding and hardened as they are. I will make your forehead like the hardest stone, harder than flint. Do not be afraid of them or terrified by them, though they are a rebellious people."
And then he said to me, "Son of man, listen carefully and take to heart all the words I speak to you. Go now to your people in exile and speak to them. Say to them, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says,' whether they listen or fail to listen."
Then the Spirit lifted me up, and I heard behind me a loud rumbling sound as the glory of the Lord rose from the place where it was standing. It was the sound of the wings of the living creatures brushing against each other, and the sound of the wheels beside them, a loud rumbling sound. The Spirit then lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness and in the anger of my spirit, with the strong hand of the Lord on me. I came to the exiles who lived near the Kabar River, and there, where they were living, I sat among them for 7 days, deeply distressed.
At the end of 7 days, the word of the Lord came to me. "Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the people of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give them warning from me. When I say to a wicked person, 'You will surely die,' and you do not warn them or speak out to dissuade them from their evil ways in order to save their life, that wicked person will die for their sin, and I will hold you accountable for their blood. But if you do warn the wicked person and they do not turn from their wickedness or from their evil ways, they will die for their sin, but you will have saved yourself."
Again, when a righteous person turns from their righteousness and does evil, I will put a stumbling block before them. They will die. Since you did not warn them, they will die for their sin. The righteous things that people did will not be remembered, and I will hold you accountable for their blood. But if you do warn the righteous people not to sin, and they do not sin, they will surely live because they took warning, and you will have saved yourself.
The hand of the Lord was on me there, and he said to me, "Get up and go out to the plain, and there I will speak to you." So I got up and went out to the plain, and the glory of the Lord was standing there, like the glory I had seen by the Kabar River, and I fell face down.
Then the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet. He spoke to me and said, "Go, shut yourself inside your house, and you, son of man, they will tie with ropes. You will be bound so that you cannot go out among the people. I will make your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth so that you will be silent and unable to rebuke them, for they are a rebellious people. But when I speak to you, I will open your mouth, and you shall say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Whoever will listen, let them listen, and whoever will refuse, let them refuse, for they are a rebellious people.
Wow. See, that's too powerful to not ever get to hear if you haven't heard that one. So this is the heavenly beings that come, and it's amazing. It's the same beings that Revelation talks about, the creatures with the multiple wings, the four-sided faces. Revelation tells us what each one of those faces represent. It's incredible how that all happens. They all go in one space. They're all on wheels that move them around. Inside the wheels are multiple eyes that are looking all over the places. And then in the midst of that is a throne, like a vault, where this being is sitting with a golden bottom, the bottom portion, from the top up, is like glowing metal. And there was rainbows up there. It's the glory of the Lord. He sends him up, and I don't know if you noticed it. How many times does he say, they are a rebellious people. They will rebel. They're rebellious. Oh, those rebellious people, they're going to rebel. He tells them over and over, but he says, I am going to go to them. He gives him the scroll to eat. Another way of putting his words in his mouth. We've seen that over and over. Go to them. He says, they're hard-headed, but I'm going to make you hard-headed. Your forehead will be as hard as flint. In other words, you'll be able to withstand anything they throw to you. The living creatures are come again where he's at, and then he learns the news that he is going to, God is going to put his tongue to the top of his mouth. It's actually going to be for a period of years that Ezekiel will have his tongue to the top of his mouth, unable to speak until the Lord wants him to speak. So when he begins to prophesy, God loosens that up and he begins to speak to them. But it's only when he says, this is what the sovereign Lord says. And he gives them that, and then when he's done with it, his tongue goes back to the top of his mouth and he's unable to speak again. And God uses that for him for many years. Isn't that just incredible to how that is? So let's go back to our section. We talked about who Ezekiel was. Now there are many similarities between Ezekiel and Isaiah. Both of them had amazing visions. Both were overcome with awe at the presence of the Lord, and both were warned that the people would not listen to them. Both had to do certain things with their bodies to represent events that would happen. The difference was Isaiah was prophesying about a time that was 140 years in the future. Ezekiel is now living through the time that he is speaking of. Just keep that straight. Isaiah is talking about something that's going to happen long in the future. Jeremiah is saying it's imminent. It's going to happen very, very, very soon. Now we've got Ezekiel living in it. Okay, so he's living through that. Ezekiel lived in the captivity in Babylon for the rest of his life. He's never going to come back home. Compare the visions of Isaiah and Ezekiel. You can look at that today or this week in your study. Both are glorious visions, and both caused the prophet to fall on their face in reverence. Boy, when the Lord appears to mortal men, it is an overwhelming thing. Ezekiel and Jeremiah would have both been living about the same time in Israel's history. Now, Jeremiah would have been at the end of his ministry. He would have been an older man at this time, but he had been preaching to the people of Judah for years, warning them that if they did not repent, Babylon would come and great judgment would fall. We saw that in Lamentations, his book of despair, as he sees the very destruction that he spoke of. The city of Jerusalem and the temple were both destroyed. Keep in mind that Ezekiel would not have witnessed this since he was taken from Jerusalem about 11 years before the destruction occurs, 10 or 11. He knew what was coming. He certainly would have known about Jeremiah's preaching. However, he's not in Jerusalem when it happens. He's in the 5th year of his captivity when that happens. False prophets had assured the captives that Jerusalem would never fall, the temple would never be destroyed. The people refused to listen to the warnings of Isaiah or the words of Jeremiah. or the message of Ezekiel. Instead, they chose to listen and follow the false prophets. However, once they hear that Jerusalem has been destroyed, and the word is going to come to them while they're by that river down in Babylon, once they hear that Jerusalem has been destroyed and that the warnings of Ezekiel are true, the people will begin to take Ezekiel just a little bit more seriously.
Really?
God placed Ezekiel as a watchman to Judah. His job was explain to them, again, the reason for their captivity and to give them hope that God would one day bring them back to the land of Israel. Can you see the pattern? Over and over and over. It's the same message. It is not a different message. It's the same one. Another prophet is doing his work in Babylon at the same time as Ezekiel. And next week, we're going to study about Daniel. Daniel is also in Babylon, but in far different circumstances than Ezekiel is. Ezekiel will mention the name of Daniel twice, in chapters 14 and in chapters 28. So while God left no stone unturned in getting his word out to his people through the prophets, the response was less than exemplary. The people continued to wither up like a dry vine. They're full of idolatry, and what's the word God uses many, many, many times? Rebellion. Even so, a faithful remnant of the people continue to believe that while they are being disciplined, one day God will bring them home. The second half of Ezekiel's book is a plan of restoration. God would restore the people to himself and to the land. He would restore them to the promise of the Davidic covenant, that the Messiah would rule and reign from David's throne, to the hope of a temple, but a far more glorious temple than they had ever known. There is a great deal of writing detailing the final temple in the millennial kingdom. It is huge. Ezekiel will give it. It is far bigger than anything they could possibly know or have ever seen. The temple where the Son of David will reign, the temple where Jesus will sit on the throne. There's a promise of healing waters and healing trees of fruit for the people during that time in the millennial kingdom. And we're told that the new city will be called The Lord is There. Prophecy for the nations. Ezekiel will not only speak forth God's word to the captives, but many of the chapters are going to outline God's plan for the other nations. Most of the prophecies are not good. The nations are going to be judged specifically for how they treated Israel throughout the history of mankind. Many of the nations are spoken of. There's all the ones that I've listed here: Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, Tyre, Sidon, Egypt, Gog of Magog, Persia, Cush, Put, Shurba, Dedan, and Tarshish. All of these countries are located in the area of the Middle East and Asia. All of these countries will come against Israel at some point in history, and all of these countries will be punished for coming against Israel. So, in Ezekiel 38 is probably the most famous prophecy concerning an invasion of Israel. It has not yet occurred. Ezekiel 38 and 39 have not yet occurred. We are still waiting to see the timing of this. So the word of the Lord came to me: Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. So Ezekiel's able to speak because of that phrase. I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen, fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. Persia, Cush, Put will be with them, all in shields and helmets. Also Gomer with all of its troops, and Beth Targoma from the far north with its troops, many nations with you. Get ready, be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered with you, and take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years you will invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which have long been desolate. They have been brought out from the nations, and now all will go live in safety. You and your troops and many nations will go up, advancing like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land. Now I've given you a list on the next page of many of the countries listed in there and what we call them today, you can see these are all countries that we're familiar with coming against Israel. Most of them are Arab countries, and most of them want to see Israel destroyed. The second part of that is what I really want you to look at. It says, in future years you will invade a land. Where it says, the mountains of Israel have been desolate for a long period of time, and then now my people are being gathered there. Well, we see that the nation of Israel was desolate for a very long period of time, until 1948, when the people began to be gathered back and Israel was reborn and the people began to come back. And now there are 8 million Jews living in Israel. This is what the Lord is talking about in that future time. This is preparation for that time. And prophetic teachers knew that in 1948, when Israel became a country, they wept because they knew that needed to be done for this prophecy to be fulfilled. When they talk about things from the far north, they're talking about very likely Russia. We see that being an intricate part of today. Now, a very important vision is the vision of dry bones. So the hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and he set me in a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. So they're very old bones. And he said, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. He said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Here's the magic phrase. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make a breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life, so that you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered the bones, but there was no breath in them. And then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, Son of man, and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breath, from the far winds, and breathe into these slain, so that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, and they came to life, and they stood on their feet, a vast army. And he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore, prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you what? Back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. And then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and that I have done it, declares the Lord. Most biblical scholars believe that this is a fulfillment of restoration, but in stages. First, there will be a worldwide regathering of Israel in unbelief. This is certainly being seen today, as currently over 8 million Jewish people have been gathered from around the world. But in unbelief, there's no breath. The Ruach HaKodesh, the breath of God, is not in the land of Israel yet. This is in preparation of the coming tribulation period. There will also be a fulfillment when believing Jews are gathered for the Messianic kingdom. The breath of life will then be given to them. So this verse is speaking of several different gatherings in the same time, but we see that being fulfilled now. This is how we know that the Jews coming from the north and the south and the east and the west, I will bring my sons from the north and my daughters from the east. I will bring them to a good and plentiful land that I've given to them. We know that this is being done in unbelief. They don't have any breath yet, but it's coming. Facts about the book. The New Testament quotes or alludes to the book of Ezekiel 60 times. About 40 of those times are in the book of Revelation. Jesus will use some of the imagery in Ezekiel as a witness to his ministry. He calls himself the Son of Man, the grapevine, the Good Shepherd, living waters. There are others. Ezekiel's writings and the writings of John in the book of Revelation, they overlap with each other. Both books are apocalyptic in their writings, and they discuss what will happen in the last days. Both discuss the tribulation period. Both will write about those living creatures we read about earlier in the throne. Both have the eating of the scroll, which is sweet on their lips, but sour in their stomach. Both discuss God's glory, specifically in the temple. Both are going to use the imagery of a prostitute to show the spiritual adultery by the people. Both are going to discuss a battle of Gog of Magog, but it's not the same battle. Both will describe the New Jerusalem of the Lord. Ezekiel could not be any clearer in the message that he gives his people while they are captives in Babylon. God is the great sovereign judge, and he will judge all nations. Each individual is responsible for their own sins. The merciful God, in his Hesed, will rescue a faithful remnant from the destruction that he will allow to fall. Both in their day they will see that, and in the last days. Those faithful will receive the glorious kingdom to come. God never leaves them hopeless. Listen to some of this. Therefore, you Israelites, I judge each of you according to your own ways, declares the sovereign Lord. Repent, turn away from all your offenses, and then your sin will not be your downfall. Rid yourself of all the offenses you've committed. Get a new heart and a new spirit. Why will you die, people of Israel? For I take no pleasure in the death of anyone, declares the sovereign Lord. Repent and live. Therefore say to the Israelites, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It is not for your sake, people of Israel, that I'm going to do these things, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations where you've gone. I will show you the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, the name you have profaned among them. And then the nations will know that I am the Lord, declares the sovereign Lord, when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. For I will take you out of the nations, I will gather you from all of the countries, I will bring you back to your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from your impurities and from your idols. I will give you a new heart and a new spirit. I will remove from you that heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and to be careful to keep my laws. All right, more than any other prophet, Ezekiel is called to be an example of what God desires for his people. Words were not enough, his actions were necessary. Look at a few of the things that Ezekiel's told to do. He lies motionless on one side for 300